Tonight on Bridge City News, another big drug bust in Medicine Hat results in the arrests of 7 people. David Steffen took the stand today as he and his wife Colette are being charged with failing to provide the necessaries of life for their son, who died in 2012. And a powerful story of the impact World Vision is having in India following a devastating cyclone which left thousands of people homeless.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Bridge City News was notified via social media about a suspected drug house in our city. Some of the neighbors by the home located at 235 20th Street North say there's been a lot of suspicious activity in the area and they're quite concerned.
So we see people coming through here all the time with what we assume is stolen property, switching tires off of bikes, doing drugs in between the dumpsters in our alley after they come out of the specific yard that seems really sketchy. There's people that come through here and try and steal our stuff in the middle of the day. They've actually been caught stealing from us. There's people coming through all hours of the night, hand-to-hand exchanges, which we assume is drug use, and people squatting in the back alleys, and it's just gross.
Lethbridge Police have notified Alert and are investigating. At this point, there is no confirmation that it is in fact a drug house. Police say if you suspect any drug or crime-related activity in your neighborhood, to give them a call right away. 7 people were arrested following a drug bust in southeastern Alberta. Alert's Medicine Hat organized crime team says more than $64,000 worth of drugs, guns, and cash were seized following a 3-month investigation. Cocaine, along with a buffing agent, magic mushrooms, $5,600 in cash, and various guns and knives were collected. 4 people from Medicine Hat and 3 from Edmonton face various drug and weapons-related offenses. David Steffen took to the stand today and gave a recount of what he says happened in the days leading up to his son Ezekiel being taken to the hospital. David and his wife Colette are facing a retrial of allegedly failing to provide the necessaries of life to their son, who died of bacterial meningitis in 2012. David Steffen told the judge that his son stopped breathing 48 hours after he thought his son recovered from croup. Steffen said once he called 911, his son began breathing again. Steffen said he declined the use of an ambulance and opted to drive Ezekiel to the hospital because he thought it would be faster. The trial at the Lethbridge Courthouse continues tomorrow. A Calgary man has been charged with attempted fraud after he tried to transfer $145,000 from someone else's account. Police were called to the TD Bank on Highlands Boulevard West on Friday after a man provided a fake Ontario birth certificate and driver's license as proof of identity to try and transfer funds from one account to another. The actual account holder did not give permissions for the funds to be transferred. When police arrived, the man ran off but was apprehended a short time later. 54-year-old Mark Anderson appeared in Lethbridge Court today, facing several charges including fraud, identity theft, and resisting arrest. The Good Samaritan Society hosted their first ever annual Good Samaritan Sammys Awards to honor their hardworking staff.
It's an opportunity for us to celebrate our staff. We couldn't do what we do without the staff that we have, and so we want to ensure that we celebrate their successes. To be able to celebrate the 5, 10, 15-year and above long service awards is significant for us. We have lots of people that are working towards that 5, 10, 15 years, and so we want to make sure that we acknowledge them.
It was very good to be here. It was the Sammy event, the Sammy Award event. And this involved more than one site, including the West Highland, Park Meadows, and couldn't be any happier to be part of this with 5, 10, and 15 years award. And I won the 15 years.
I'm going to retire this summer, but it has been a wonderful place to work, and it's been a challenge being assistant manager, but it's been a learning experience, and it's been really good. And it's been a really nice event today. Wonderful meal, lots of good people.
The Good Samaritan Society is a faith-based nonprofit group that provides accommodations, health, and community care services to aging individuals in need. This weekend, former Lethbridge Hurricane Dylan Cousins became the first Yukon-born player to be drafted in the first round of the NHL draft. He was selected 7th overall by the Buffalo Sabres. The Whitehorse native has played for the Hurricanes for the past 2 seasons and recorded 34 goals in the 2018-2019 campaign. Lethbridge play-by-play announcer Dustin Forbes says Buffalo is lucky to have drafted such a dynamic talent.
Good two-way centerman. Obviously, he's proven that he's been able to score at any level that he's played at among his peers, the Western Hockey League included. Even as a 15-year-old when he came up to the Hurricanes 3 years ago, had 8 points in 12 playoff games with a team that went to the Eastern Conference Final. And that's the toughest time of year to play hockey and produce, and he was able to do that at 15. And he went to the Hurricanes as a 16-year-old as a full-timer and scored over 20 goals, over 50 points, and was the WHL Rookie of the Year. And then last year, of course, passed the 30-goal and 80-point mark for the first time in his WHL career. And you know what? He's a big, powerful skating centerman that has a good shot, has a pretty good eye to make plays. And I'm not surprised that he was a top 10 NHL pick going to Buffalo at number 7.
Only 2 players in history from the Yukon have ever stepped on NHL ice. The Lethbridge Hurricanes home opener has been announced for Friday, September 20th at 7 p.m. The ATB Financial Lethbridge Rotary Dragon Boat Festival took place at Henderson Lake on Saturday afternoon. In 2002, the event was initiated by the Rotary clubs in Lethbridge and has since grown to bring tourists in from all over Canada and the United States. A number of local clubs were eager to compete at home.
For the local teams, one of our biggest goals is the camaraderie. We love the fact that everybody gets together, they practice together, they play together, and they usually go out after the practices together and enjoy friendship and a little bit and sometimes a lot of competition. We know that people come to our festival from all over because we have an absolutely perfect venue for racing. We have lots of space where people can watch the races on the water. We have an absolutely excellent festival with lots of entertainment.
This was the 17th year of the Lethbridge Rotary Dragon Boat Festival. As our weather warms up, police are reminding motorists to be on the lookout for those who ride motorcycles. Tim Ryder is a man who has ridden his bike more than 240,000 miles over the last 48 years. He says he came close to losing his life on a few road trips. He says he felt the hand of God protecting him on more than one occasion.
And all of a sudden, the rear wheel locks totally. Apparently the chain had come loose, locked the entire wheel, and all the laws of physics said I should go down. And I've only been riding about a month and a half. I didn't know enough. And I'm convinced to this day, a couple of angels, or maybe an entire squadron, I didn't see them, but I wasn't good enough to save us. We just kept skidding around the corner. I finally pulled up a straight line. Took a couple of hours to get the bike fixed. We did. But that was one of the factors that showed me the reality of a spiritual world. And that was a key part of coming to Christ like about 5 months later.
Catch my full interview with Rider Tim Ryder, pastor, rider, and author of the book, A Motorcycle in the Open Road, coming up in the second half of our show. Good news for the city of Calgary. The Stampede City has been selected to host the World Petroleum Congress in the year 2023. Calgary beat out 4 other global cities in voting that took place in Russia. A news release from the World Petroleum Congress Canada calls the event the Olympics of Oil and Gas. Officials say it will bring an estimated 5,000 delegates to the city. Calgary also hosted the World Petroleum Congress in 2000. A pilot program has been launched in Calgary to ensure recently released inmates with a history of injection drug use are screened and treated for hepatitis C. Health officials say it is often difficult for ex-cons to get medical appointments. The program partners released inmates with people with similar experiences called peer navigators. They make sure patients make their appointments, whether they be medical, legal, or for social services. Ashley Caddo is a young Calgary mother who tragically lost her son Noah in a drowning accident just over a year ago. She says she and her husband were at a vacation home in Orlando, Florida, when they turned their back on their 3-year-old for a very short time.
It was just a few minutes had passed that we noticed Noah was gone. And so instinct kicked in, and I ran out to the front of the house to start looking for Noah. And my husband then realized that he had probably gone to the back of the house to try and go swimming. So that is where we found Noah.
Watch the full interview with Ashley as she describes how God has helped her and her family heal through this journey, coming up in the second half of our show. Canadian astronaut David St. Jacques is coming home after spending more than 6 months in space, the longest ever by a Canadian. St. Jacques, who's been spending most of his time aboard the International Space Station, says he looks forward to the simple pleasures of life upon his return to Earth. The 49-year-old said he wants to spend time swimming in a swimming pool and to learn how to walk again. St. Jacques blasted off December 3rd for his first mission. He's had a lot of memorable firsts, including his first spacewalk on April the 8th, and used the Canadarm2 to capture a SpaceX Dragon cargo vehicle in May. U.S. President Donald Trump said he is still considering military action against Iran after it downed an unmanned U.S. military aircraft. Trump says the use of force is always on the table until we get this resolved.
I don't know, unintentional or not. It was probably intentional, as I said, but regardless, they targeted something without a person in it, without a man or woman, and certainly without anybody from the United States in it. So we want to be proportionate. We're getting a lot of praise for what I did, and we have people on both sides. Some like it and some probably not as much. My expression is we have plenty of time.
U.S. President Trump signed an executive order today targeting Iran with financial sanctions. It is the latest action the U.S. has taken to pressure Tehran from developing nuclear weapons and supporting militant groups.
Today's action follows a series of aggressive behaviors by the Iranian regime in recent weeks, including shooting down of U.S. drones. You shot down the drone. I guess everyone saw that one, and many other things. They've done many other things aside from the individual drone. You saw the tankers, and we know of other things that were done also which were not good and not appropriate. The supreme leader of Iran is one who ultimately is responsible for the hostile conduct of the regime. He's respected within his country. His office oversees the regime's most brutal instruments, including the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Sanctions imposed through the executive order that I'm about to sign will deny the Supreme Leader and the Supreme Leader's office and those closely affiliated with him and the office access to key financial resources and support.
Two siblings from the famed Flying Walenda safely crossed Times Square over the weekend, 25 stories above the pavement. Nick and Leanna Walenda walked from opposite ends of a 1,300-foot wire yesterday.
I'm going to do this. What do you think, New York City? What do you think, world? Perfectly.
I'm up.
Praise God. You're amazing. Yeah, baby, I hear you.
Yep, I'm here. Mr. Cook?
Not for those who are faint of heart. It was on this day that the Berlin blockade began during the Cold War. Boxing champ Jack Dempsey was born, and actor Jackie Gleason of The Honeymooners dies. This is Today in History for June the 24th.
June 24th, 1948. An early Cold War crisis as the Soviet Union cuts off all land and water routes between West Germany and what's then West Berlin. It's an attempt to force the United States and its Western allies to abandon the city amid Soviet expansion across Eastern Europe. But the U.S. and its allies organize a massive airlift of supplies into West Berlin, and the blockade ends the next year. 1895. Jack Dempsey, world heavyweight boxing champ and a sports icon during the early 20th century, is born in Manassas, Colorado. And 1987.
You haven't got any sense of humor.
Oh, yes, I do. I married you, didn't I?
Comedian and actor Jackie Gleason, known as the Great One, dies at his home in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Gleason, star of the early TV classic sitcom The Honeymooners, was 71. Today in History, June 24th. Carlotta Bradley, The Associated Press.
World Vision is providing ongoing humanitarian aid in India after major cities were hit by Cyclone Fani. Thousands were forced to evacuate from their homes. As we hear in this next report, many are living in constant fear for when the next storm may strike.
Following Cyclone Fani, which battered India's coastline last month, killing at least 16 people, children's charity World Vision UK continues to bring urgent relief to thousands of people affected by this natural disaster. Franklin Jones, head of Humanitarian and Emergency Affairs at World Vision India, has the latest on how they're responding, particularly for the many children impacted by this crisis.
The challenge for them was the children, taking care of the children. So we immediately started our child-friendly spaces, which was around in all 32 child-friendly spaces in the community we started, where we were engaging the children. Most of the children, as it happens after each disaster, they were traumatized in terms of as they were not having adequate shelter and food.
Another cyclone was recently headed to India, but fortunately subsided. However, those who were forced to flee their homes remain in constant fear for when the next storm will strike. In response, World Vision is providing longer-term practical help to rebuild homes and provide livelihoods.
For our recovery phase, what we have done is we have identified the communities which are very much affected, and most likely the government assistance would take little more time. They will get it, but in this gap, they need some livelihood options where they can support their family until then. So we have started the Cash for Work program, where they are engaging in the community, in their own communities. Some of them, they are rebuilding their houses. We provide them the cash for the work which they do. So that is the livelihood option which we have given. There are few funding which is awaited for us. Most likely we are going to get it, but still there is a gap. So when that funding comes, we are trying to look at the shelter, reaching out to the shelter needs of the people, which is still a huge need in the communities over there.
Peter Wooding for the Global News Alliance.
We had a little more moisture today, and that trend will continue tonight. A full look at the weather picture is coming up in just a moment. We had more shower activity off and on today. Tonight, a chance of thunder showers developing with a low near 5 degrees. Rain and 22 is expected for tomorrow. The clouds and showers should clear out on Wednesday, bringing sunshine and a high near 23. A low pressure system returns on Thursday, bringing rain and a high near 20. A slight chance of showers on Friday with a high near 22. A nice weekend is shaping up, sunshine and 23 degrees for Saturday, and mainly clear sky and 24 for Sunday. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 23 and an average low of 10. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1974 at 34 degrees, and the record low was 2 in 1950. Sunrise was at 5:24, sunset at 9:43. Let's have a look at how tomorrow's shaping up across the country now. Victoria and Vancouver will be mainly cloudy and 21, showers and 16 in Calgary on Tuesday. Showers and 17 degrees for Edmonton. A slight chance of thunder showers and 23 degrees for Regina. Rain at 21 for Saskatoon. A chance of rain at 25 for Winnipeg tomorrow. Showers at 24 for Toronto. Rain at 26 degrees is on tap for Ottawa. Thunder showers at 21 for Montreal. In the Maritimes, mainly sunny at 27 for Fredericton. Just a few clouds at 24 for Halifax. Mainly sunny at 22 for Charlottetown. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect a mixture of sun and cloud and a high near 14 tomorrow. A recent National Energy Board analysis of federal stats shows Canadian agricultural energy demand increased by 50% in 2016. The amount of energy consumed, however, per inflation-adjusted dollar of agricultural output fell 17%. The NAB says the trend toward greater energy consumption is happening in many Canadian sectors. One energy and crop engineer in Ontario says farmers are bracing for new technologies, including the use of LED lighting in barns and more remote monitoring with automated processes on farms. Canada's Agriculture Ministry and Environment Canada have teamed up to create new extreme weather indices to help producers prepare for nasty weather. The weekly forecasts for up to a month are available online and will predict extreme weather factors such as rain, hail, wind, and heat. Farmers will be able to see maps of drying day occurrences which are important during planting and harvesting seasons. During the growing season, there's a maximum wind speed and number of strong wind days look ahead to help predict the spread of pests and when to spray. Work on this project originally began in 2006 when both agencies agreed to share climate data. Canadian Utilities and its partner Quanta Services have signed a deal to help sell Alberta Powerline to a group including TD Greystone Asset Management. The transaction is worth around $300 million and the assumption of $1.4 billion in debt. As part of its sale, Canadian Utilities is offering Indigenous groups along the 508-kilometre transmission line the opportunity to obtain up to a 40% equity interest. The final ownership mix will be determined upon the close of the purchase option for Indigenous communities. Automaker Daimler has downgraded its earnings forecast for the year. It recently announced it would be hit by a high three-digit million charge related to government measures related to its diesel vehicles. It says instead of seeing slight growth as initially projected, earnings will be comparable to last year's, or about $12.6 billion US. Last Friday, Daimler was ordered by Germany's vehicle authority to recall 60,000 SUVs with a technology the government said impermissibly reduced emissions controls. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, 7 people were arrested following a drug bust in southeastern Alberta. Alert's Medicine Hat organized crime team says more than $64,000 worth of drugs, guns, and cash were seized following a 3-month investigation. Cocaine, along with a buffing agent, magic mushrooms, $5,600 in cash, and various guns and knives were also collected. 4 people from Medicine Hat and 3 from Edmonton face various drugs and weapons-related offenses. Up next, a powerful story of loss as BCN has an exclusive interview with a mom who is still recovering from her 3-year-old son who drowned. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. So much to see and do on Canada Day. Start your Canada Day with a free pancake breakfast at Westside Community Church from 8 to 11 a.m. Bring your whole family and enjoy delicious fluffy pancakes, games and face painting for the kids, and prizes. For details, visit mywestside.ca. Also on July 1st, come to the Nikayuko Japanese Garden for more Canada Day celebrations. Admission is $7 for the entire day. Experience a tea ceremony, lantern decorating, minyo dancing, taiko drumming, and more. And then, enjoy the best seats in the house for the amazing Canada Day fireworks at 11 p.m. For more information, visit nikayuko.com. Come celebrate at the Galt Museum and Archives as they present an old-fashioned carnival. Taking place from 1 to 4 p.m., enjoy games, entertainment, and free popcorn. There's no cost for admission. For details, visit galtmuseum.com. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
One of the most difficult things a human being could ever experience is the loss of a young child. We're going to talk about that today and how to walk through that kind of grief. Joining me now from Calgary via Skype is Ashley Caddo. Ashley has a very powerful story to share. Ashley, you and your husband had to walk through this. You lost your precious son Noah in a tragic drowning accident while on vacation in Florida. Can you share the story with our viewers, please?
Sure. So we had went to Orlando, Florida for a family vacation last March. The 17th of March started out like any other day. We got up, we went for breakfast, we came back to the house to start packing because we were leaving the next day. For some reason, I decided to pack in the bedroom, and my husband was busy packing as well. And it was just a few minutes had passed that we noticed Noah was gone. And so instinct kicked in, and I ran out to the front of the house to start looking for Noah. And my husband then realized that he had probably gone to the back of the house to try and go swimming. So that is where we found Noah.
So how much time actually elapsed?
It felt like an eternity that I was looking for Noah, but it was probably only about 3 to 5 minutes.
Wow, it was that short a time. Now, the grief that you and your husband experienced must have been just overwhelming and devastating. Were there any specific things that helped you through this whole journey, this process?
The first thing that has helped us has been our faith. We just really believe that God is the keeper of our soul, and He has our best interests at heart, and that He just weeps with us at the loss of Noah. Another thing is our support system. We have an amazing support system. Our church family, our families, our friends. It's just that has made the grief journey bearable.
You know, we've all heard the expression that time heals all wounds, but it's only been around 15 months since Noah's passed. Has some of that time actually healed some of those wounds for you and your husband?
I would say time doesn't heal wounds. It just lessens the sting. That's what I found so far.
Now, you actually traveled back to Florida 1 year after the loss of Noah. What was that like, and was it maybe helpful in some ways?
Yes, so we went back for the 1 year anniversary of Noah's death. And I specifically remember last year saying, I will never come back to Orlando. But over the year, God had placed on my heart that we should go back and we should celebrate the fact that we got 3.5 years with Noah. So we went back and we did all the things that Noah loved to do. We went on all the rides, we went swimming, we ate his favorite food, and it was extremely healing to be in that place where he was just a year before.
Did you really find that you and your husband grieve in different ways? Some people are quite emotional, others like to be alone, maybe still others like to have people around. How did it really differ between you and your husband?
I would say the first year of our grief journey was very similar. We grieved the same, we needed the same things. But after the year, I find we're grieving differently. I'm more drawing into myself, where my husband thrives on keeping busy, doing things for the community, for the church, for himself. So that's really where our grief journeys have separated now. But we're still really focused on our marriage and keeping that together and just working through it together.
Yeah, I know a lot of dads, a lot of fathers. I mean, I'm a father myself, and I'd probably want to keep busy as well, so maybe my mind's not focused solely on the death of my child. Now, your husband, Luke, has started a support group for fathers who have lost a child called Dads in Grief. How's that going so far?
It's going really well. So immediately following Noah's death, I had a lot of women reach out to me about different support groups, but there was nothing for the dads. And so my husband Luke and a fellow bereaved dad named Riley decided that this was something they would take on and journey together. And it's been amazing. The men we meet once a month in a public setting, so a pub or a lounge or a restaurant. And it's just an informal way to talk about their children, talk about their grief journey. And there's no pressure because we find a lot of the support groups are very directed in their questions. And so this is just a kind of informal meeting place for the dads to go.
Now, you started the Noah Samuel Foundation. Can you explain to our viewers what the purpose of the foundation is?
Yes, so we have recently started the Noah Samuel Foundation, and our hope is to spread love to grieving families in the Calgary, Alberta area. And by doing this, we hope to just support them financially with funeral costs, counseling, extra time off work they need.
Now, funerals can also be very expensive, and it does put an extra burden on a grieving, stressed out family. How did you handle the financial pressures of this in regards to Noah's funeral?
So the average funeral for a child costs around $10,000 to $15,000. And a lot of young families aren't financially prepared for that. So our church family really rallied around us and our community of Auburn Bay. They held bake sales, they had a GoFundMe page, and before we knew it, we were able to pay for Noah's flight back to Canada, and then we were also able to pay for the funeral. And so that's how we were able to carry that financial burden with no debt. But a lot of the families would have gone into debt.
I know my insurance provider, when I have life insurance for myself and my wife, they also talked about a child rider, which was like $10,000 or $15,000 in case, unfortunately, one of your children passes on too. So, like you said, you would be covered in that regard. So how can people support the Noah Samuel Foundation, and how do you decide how the finances get distributed to families in need?
So what you can do is you can head to our website. It's www.noahsamuel.ca, and there's a donate button on the bottom of the homepage. And then how we decide which families which will help is we actually have a form that a family member or a friend can fill out and submit to us online, and then we'll get in contact with the family.
How has this tragedy really affected your view of who God really is?
I feel like I have such an intimate relationship with our Heavenly Father, and it hasn't changed my view that He is good and that He loves us. I still believe all those things. It has just brought me into a closer relationship with Him.
Has anybody ever actually said to you, Ashley, they said, you know what, how can you still believe in God? Why would a God of love allow something like this to happen to you and your family? You should turn your back. I mean, really, what are you thinking here? Has anybody actually said that to you?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do not believe that God is good, because how can He let children die, and how can there be evil in the world? But I believe that this wasn't His plan, and I'm just waiting for heaven, and I'm waiting for the new earth, and that's when everything that's wrong will be made right.
And you
so
will
that's
see Noah again, right?
Yes, exactly.
They say birthdays and holidays, especially Christmas, can be very difficult for families who've lost a loved one. How did you handle Christmas without Noah?
The first Christmas without Noah was extremely difficult. It wasn't merry and bright, like I used to say, but I found a new peace in Christmas and a new hope. It just meant so much to know that God sent down His Son during that time, just so that He could have relationship with me. And so that brought a new meaning for me for Christmas. But it's definitely difficult, and the sting is there. The sting of death is there, and it wasn't the same, and I don't know if it ever will be the same, but it'll soften with time, I believe.
Has any specific scripture really helped encourage you and help with the healing process for you and your husband?
Yes, so as soon as Noah passed away, I just really clung to the book of Job, and I just looked at Job and how the worst happened to him, and he still clung to God's goodness, and he never even questioned why. And so that's just a book of the Bible that I cling to. And, his friends were not great friends in the book of Job. And I just cling to how he just loved God so much, and he didn't question His goodness.
Amen. Now, you write on your website about running towards the roar. Can you explain what that is?
Yes. So shortly after Noah passed away, a friend gifted me with a book by Pastor Levi Lesko. It's called Through the Eyes of the Lion. And in it, he talks about running towards the roar. And so the roar would be, in my case, grief. In another person's case, it might be fear. So you're just running towards your fear with your head held high and God with you. And you're just going to face all these things that you're terrified of. And so for me, that's living life without Noah. And so I run towards the roar in every aspect of my grief, of sharing my grief journey with everybody, of going back to Florida, of talking about Noah, of doing life with Noah and still trying to parent Noah in death.
Now, you have a daughter as well, Abigail. How old is she now?
She is 2 now.
She's 2. How is she responding to all of this?
So right now she has no idea. She knows she has a brother named Noah. She knows his picture. But we have taken counseling sessions on child grief, and we know that she will grieve at each different developmental stage in her life. And so we're just going to support her and love on her and just show her God's goodness through each of those stages. When she starts to ask about Noah and wonder about why he died and where he is, and we'll just take that journey as it comes.
Have you and your husband talked about having more children?
We have, but we have not settled on whether or not we will. That's something we don't take lightly. So we felt our family was complete, and we still feel like our family is complete with Noah in heaven. So we're just praying about it and seeing where God leads us in that way.
So Ashley, any final thoughts to share with those who are watching who have also suffered the loss of a special loved one in their lives?
I would just say don't rush your grief journey. It's something that isn't linear. There's no end date to it. And I know a lot of people think it's been over a year, I should be better. I feel worse. So I would just be gentle with yourself, take time to care for yourself. And if you're dealing with somebody who is in grief, just sit with them and love them and pray for them and just be there for them.
Did you and your husband actually blame yourselves too for Noah's death at one point in time?
Yes, definitely. And I still do. And I'm still walking that journey. I know that that's covered by the blood of Jesus, but it's very difficult to walk with that, knowing that it could have been prevented.
So Ashley, why don't you explain to our viewers exactly who Noah is? I don't want to say was, because he's still alive in your heart and he's alive in heaven. So really explain to our viewers, like, was he a happy child? Like, what sorts of things did he like to do besides swimming?
So he was a very happy child. I would say he was the perfect child because he was so easy since the day he was born. He was so happy. He loved Lego, and he loved Paw Patrol, and he loved the color blue. But he really actually loved Jesus. And he declared at a young age that Jesus was in his heart. And so I just always knew that God had big plans for him. So I'm proud of him.
And we're very proud of you and your husband and your whole family, Ashley. God bless you during your grieving process, and our thoughts and prayers are always with you. And thanks so much for your time today. We really appreciate you being on Bridge City News.
Thank you.
So what comes to mind when you think of motorcycles? Some people think of biker gangs, others maybe accidents, while still other people may think of the wind in their hair and the freedom of the open road, like I used to with my old 69 Yamaha street bike. Today's guest has a few thoughts on this as well. Tim Ryder is a pastor and teacher and author of the book, God, a Motorcycle and the Open Road. Welcome to Bridge City News, Tim.
Thank you so much, Hal. It's good to be with you guys. I wish I were up there in person.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have you here. Now, Tim, you've done a bit of riding over your last 48 years, 240,000 miles, 46 states, 3 countries. Out of all of this, you wrote a book. So what kind of adventures can we look forward to reading in this book?
Ooh, a huge variety. We've got 50 different chapters. Each chapter is about 1,000 words, and a third of that is a story about biking. And then the rest talks about what lessons we can learn about life and God from that story. Things like walking into a bar and getting scared to death, being roused by a cop in a park in Groton, Connecticut, being chased for probably 20 miles by a mad motorist.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, when you ask people why they enjoy riding, a common answer is, well, it's the freedom and adventure. Now, do you think there is something that the Creator really instilled within us, why we enjoy riding so much?
I think so. You know, I need mountain and outside fixes regularly. And I think the reason for that, you see God much more clearly in nature. And when I'm up in the mountains, like that road from Banff up to Jasper, it just absolutely astounded me. Or the going to the Sun Highway in Glacier. You see God, and you're not in this protective steel cage. You're right out in the midst of it. You get all the aromas, the sights, 360 degrees of being able to see God's glory. When we're in the city, we see man's production. When we're on a bike out in the woods, in the wilderness, we see God's, and I prefer the latter.
Now, my first set of wheels, as I mentioned, was an old Yamaha street bike. I used to take it from my hometown of Calgary to McKay's Ice Cream, 52 flavors in Cochrane, Alberta. It was a lot of fun, an amazing time. And yeah, I did spill a little bit on myself. Now, how and why did you get into riding a bike?
You know, it's looking back, it had to be a God thing. I was before my senior year in college, that a neighbor had his little Honda Trail 90 for his kids. So he had to go pick them up. And he said, Tim, you want to come along? And it was a boring day, so I did. And Hal pushed and pushed to get me to ride the bike. It was a big dirt track. I had no interest whatsoever. Finally, just getting to shut up. I said, okay, I didn't know how to shift or anything. I got back and said, well, did you shift? I said, oh, yeah, of course I did. No idea what to do. And it was okay. It was nice with the wind in my face. And then the next year, we're in the midst of finals week. And we went out to see Easy Rider. It was 1970. And we were going to take a trip to Canada. One of my senior year roommate, another roommate had moved up to Canada in Kamloops. We're going to go see Ron and work for a TV station there. It turned out that Mark ran out of money, and I got in an accident in my car, and then we saw Easy Rider, and I thought, I like that. That looks like that freedom of the open road. You're in the midst of nature. And so I saved a little bit of money, bought a 350 Honda Scrambler, blue, and took that to Canada, month-long trip. And that absolutely hooked me. It changed the course of my life. I don't think that ride around the dirt field on Little Trail 90 would have ever done it. But seeing Easy Rider got me into the trip. And that trip was transformative to see God's glory. What's ironic, I wasn't a follower at that point. I grew up in church, got away. And this is that time of searching. It was about 5 months after that trip that I finally came back to God. And that trip on the bike played a key role.
Now, in your opening chapter, you quote Psalms 45, 3 through 4. Ride majestically, ride triumphantly, ride on the side of truth. Why did you choose that?
A friend of mine gave me that verse. He's from the outside of Calgary, Murray Pura. He's a pastor, an author, and a neat guy. And I love the last part about ride on the side of truth. Here's one of the stories from the chapter. I was living in Taos, New Mexico then. A friend in West Lafayette, Indiana was getting married. So I rode the bike out and I was coming back across the Kansas plains, wide open. And I pulled up and passed this car with a girl and a lady driver and a couple of daughters in it. And she was being followed by maybe three guys in the car. She looked scared to death. So I pulled ahead and just waited, stayed close. They would let her pull ahead and then pull ahead. She pulled into to a rest area, thinking that they stopped, waited, she came out. Finally, she pulled off to the side of the road. And I'm not a big hero. I'm not a mixed martial arts type guy, but I couldn't not do anything. So they had stopped. The guy started getting out of his car. I stopped the bike. I threw my leg over. I'm this long-haired hippie biker, and it looks like a chopped bike. It was a stock 750 Honda extended front end with like an Easy Rider paint job, kind of like this. And these guys saw this long-haired biker get off. They jumped back in their car, spun, did a 180 across the dirt median, and were never seen again. So I think we need to, whenever we can as followers of God, do we can to support people, especially those that are more vulnerable than she was. And I didn't want to scare her even more, so I stayed in the bike, let her pass me, and she gave this nice little appreciative wave. Never saw her again. The guys never followed her, at least at that point.
By the way, that helmet reminded me a little bit of Evel Knievel. Now, what lessons does your book have for those who do not ride motorbikes?
A couple of them. One of the things I found that people who have friends or family members that ride are loving it. They get an insight into what thrills them, what their loved one enjoys about it. A lot of them being given as gifts to those people. But I think the key is there's an entrancement with motorcycles that permeates a lot of people if you don't ride. A lot are scared to ride. They've kind of toyed with the idea, but they just never have. And it gives them an insight into what it means to be out in the middle of God's glory, in his creation, and what the people they know and love think and love.
Now, you said in a big trip in 1974 was to find America. What did you discover during that trip?
A lot of things. I discovered that Americans were much better than I ever thought. This is the height of Watergate. The Vietnam War was still going on. It was a country in turmoil. Cities were burning with race riots. And I was kind of a little bit scared taking a bike that was painted like the Easy Rider bike across the country. I went to the South. And I remember what happened to two guys in Easy Rider at the end. It wasn't good. And I discovered people were so helpful. I had one couple outside of Boston invite me to stay in their house for a couple of days and tour. That he leaves work the next morning. His wife and 5-year-old son are there all alone with this long-haired hippie biker. Totally astounded me. I found the biggest problems I had were from law enforcement who didn't trust motorcyclists. It was right at, like I said, Watergate was coming to a peak, and I went into the Rhode Island State Capitol. That was the first colony to have full religious freedom, and you could see the charter signed by the King of England. I'm a history geek. I was a history major at Pepperdine, and I missed the last tour of the day. And I'm kind of complaining to the guy in Moding. I said, I'm a history guy. I'm a school teacher. I really want to see it. Well, I'll tell you what, wait till the tour's over. I'll give you a special trip back. So he took me back into the room where they put it away. There's a teletype machine. And as I'm reading it, the teletype goes off. Nixon was scheduling a speech for that night. He'd called Vice President Ford back to Washington. The word he was going to resign. And I saw the American system worked. It's that grand experiment in democracy, which had never been done at that level before, not even in Rome and the Greek city-states. It was working. And so it was a combination. The system worked, the people worked. I had so many invite me into their homes to stay. You pull up to a rest area and you've got your gear packed, and this is more back in the 70s, but even still today, people talk if you're on a bike. If you're in a car, they ignore you. You're one of a million. They see you in the bike and say, hey, where are you from? Where are you heading?
Did you ever stay at many of those KOA campgrounds? I did a few of those trips myself.
I did. Most of the time, I just find a place. I just graduated from college. Well, I was teaching at that point at a small Christian school, didn't pay a lot, so I was saving money. And I wouldn't even go KOA most of the time. I'd find a little place on a little bitty side road where nobody could see me. Sometimes in a rest area, every so often I get a hotel room. And stayed with family and friends. Probably out of the 60 days on the road, probably 10 were under a roof.
Now, Tim, you've been riding for close to 50 years. What frightened you the most over these years of riding? Any nasty spills?
Yeah, I've been fortunate on that. The only time I went down, I had a bad back. I put a brand new tire in the back, and I'm going around a corner that wasn't even full 90, just 135. And so I went down, I was going like maybe 5 miles an hour, didn't get hurt. But the scariest, on that night that Nixon was resigning, I pulled into Groton, Connecticut, and it was either get a hotel room with a TV or go to a bar. Being a poor teacher, chose the bar, walked in a place called the Grotto. And as you walked in, there's a hallway going down both sides. And being right-handed, I just got a natural turn to the right, it was really dark. Walked around the wall where it opened up into the bar. Kind of a redneck bar, the place that a long-haired hippie biker would not want to stay. So I turned around, and just as I turned around there, another guy turned around at the opposite end. And you can't look a guy in the eye because that's a challenge. So I just kind of kept my head down, keep an eye on where he was, and I moved off to my left, and he moved to his right in front of me. I moved to my right, and he moved to his left. And I'm thinking, Tim, you are going to get the holy snot beat out of you here. This is one guy, he looks kind of bulky. He's got all of his friends in there. So I thought I better make peace. So I said, hey, I don't want any trouble. And this guy raised his hands. It was a mirror. It was my own reflection that scared me half to death.
That's incredible. Now you do both solo rides and group rides. What are the pros and cons of riding solo?
Solo, you've got more freedom, more individuality. You can go wherever you want. There's 4 or 5 of us that take a big trip every year. And where we go is kind of a group consensus. You figure it out. I love to fish. So on the solo trips, if I'm near a trout stream, I can throw in. These guys aren't fishermen, so I've passed some beautiful trout streams and rivers, and I've just got to pass them. So solo, you've got that freedom to choose your path, a little bit more time to meditate and ponder. Benefits of going together, if anything goes wrong, you've got help there. But also the fellowship, the companionship. We've got a group of guys, we call ourselves the Gray Hogs. Gray because we're old, hogs because we eat too much, not because we ride Harleys. And it's a delightful time. that last year we went up to Canada, almost to Jasper. This year we're going to Oregon, Washington. I may, on my own, do a solo part going up. There's a little town in Alaska, Hyder. It's the southernmost town you can reach by road. And some bikers from Pennsylvania, we were in North Dakota last year, told me about it. So I may go shooting on up to Prince George, then over to Hyder and bag. That'll be state number 47 on the bucket list of 50 states on two wheels.
Now, your book, which is called God, a Motorcycle in the Open Road, also talks about a time when you think angels helped you out. Tell me a bit about that.
That was also in Canada. I love that country. I was coming down from Banff on the road to Radium Hot Springs, and I'm not smart enough to convert it to kilometers, but I was doing about 60 miles per hour, and the sign said 35, so this long sweeping turn to the right. And doing 60 at a 35 zone isn't bad on a bike. However, there were two of us on the bike, and all of our gear was in a duffel bag up high. And we're going about halfway into it, and all of a sudden, the rear wheel locks totally. Apparently, the chain had come loose, locked the entire wheel, and all the laws of physics said I should go down. And I've only been riding about a month and a half. I didn't know enough. And I'm convinced to this day, a couple of angels, or maybe an entire squadron, I didn't see them, but I wasn't good enough to save us. We just kept skidding around the corner. I finally pulled up a straight line. Took a couple of hours to get the bike fixed. We did. But that was one of the factors that showed me the reality of a spiritual world. And that was a key part of coming to Christ like about 5 months later.
Yeah, it's a miracle, absolutely. Now, Tim, motorbikes can be very dangerous. What safety advice do you have for our viewers who ride, or maybe the drivers of other vehicles who are around motorbikes?
I had just started, and a guy that had ridden quite a bit, in fact, he had fixed one of my bikes for me, put it together. He said, look on every car as intentionally out to get you. And always leave a buffer, leave some space. If they come after you, you can get away a little bit. It's become since then instinctive, and it's good advice on a car. The best advice if we want to stay safe on a bike is never get on one. They are inherently more dangerous, there's no doubt on that, but the benefits they bring to some of us are well worth it.
You know, it's interesting. I had the pleasure of interviewing a gentleman that owned a Harley dealership in Calgary, Southern Alberta, Harley Davidson. And he says to me, Hal, when these bikes come from the factory, they're quiet. We put on the aftermarket mufflers to make them loud. So we let people know, the drivers know around, that we're there. It's for our own safety. We do that most of the time. I thought, isn't it about the image for Harley? He says, no, it's more about our safety. So you know there's a motorbike there. So you're always aware. I found that was very interesting. So what advice would you give to new riders?
Go to a safety course. Learn how to ride. Take some time. Start on a smaller bike. One of the stats is that this has been for a long time. There are 3 factors that lead to fatal accidents on a bike. If you're under 21, if you're on a super bike, or on any bike for the first 6 months. So if you've got all 3 of those factors, it's pretty dangerous. So you start small. You don't get the big bike that's too much for you to handle. And get to know it. Take a safety course. Once you get to know that bike, bump it up a little bit. I'm just selling my Honda ST1300 now. Just bought a Goldwing. I'm finding as I get older, I love the comfort. And the ST is tempting me to go faster than I should, as fast as I used to. So you've got to push a little bit, but if you push too much, you die. So another piece of advice would be listen to your head, not just your heart.
And no more choppers.
You know, there's a place for them. I love the looks of them. The second bike was the 750 that was semi-chopped. I would love to get one of those American chopper bikes for around town. They're not that comfortable on a long road, that they bounce more. When you've got the long extension of the front end, turning is a real pain. But dang, they look good. They are gorgeous vehicles.
Tim Ryder, author of God, a Motorcycle in the Open Road. Thanks a lot for joining us today from California.
Al, I really appreciate it. And if you ever get another bike, let me know and we'll take a ride when I get up to Canada next time.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Tim. On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.